And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on Wednesday, July 30th, 2025. And starting off with the sea ice, much of the Chukchi Sea has open water all along the Chukchi Sea coastline to Utqiagvik, and then as we go from Utqiagvik to Kaktovik, there is still some ice there, but it is going to continue to melt off as we head through the late summer season, and we do have a warming trend coming up along areas of the west, north, and central interiors as a result of a ridge of high pressure that's going to be building northeastward Thursday into the upcoming weekend. Temperatures are going to get back up above 70 in a number of locations along and especially north there of the Yukon River to the Brooks Range. So looking at the satellite image, we still have this low pressure circulation, though not quite as defined as a few days ago in the North Pacific, and we have weak spokes of energy or trough with moisture that are rotating in a counterclockwise manner. So that's why we've seen the rain enhance again across south central this afternoon, as I was talking about yesterday. And there's still other areas of either light rain or some light rain showers that are lingering along the Gulf Coast, parts of the Panhandle. More toward the interior, getting in here south of Watson Lake in Canada, those are thunderstorms, and we still have some convective showers and a few isolated thunderstorms northwest Canada surrounding Dawson on up into parts of the interior. But again, the more notable weather has been the cloudier, cooler temperatures and rain next to the ridge of high pressure that was anchored over the southeast part of the Bering Sea through the early week is going to now build back to the north and east. But with the sunshine, Dillingham, King Salmon have seen temperatures around 72 degrees this afternoon. And back to the west, we have a couple of lows. One low, an initial warm front, has already pushed through the Aleutian chain, and another one is going to come up, join and link up with the low up here in the lower Bering, but the warmer air will get kind of pinched off just along and southeast of the eastern Aleutians as we round out into Friday and Saturday. So looking at the weather map here for Thursday afternoon, we still have a chance of a few lingering showers in parts of the Panhandle along the Gulf Coast. We still have that weak low circulating but gradually filling here along the North Pacific Gulf interface. Meanwhile, high pressure building from the west coast near Nome up here to the entrance of the Mackenzie River. Further south and west, there's the lead low with the warm front washing out as a trough, and then here comes another surge of warmer moist air with a second low as we get into Friday. It's one low now just north of the western and central Aleutians, 985 low with a occluded front and just a little the warm sector getting pinched off a bit but pulling through the eastern Aleutians, tip of the Alaska Peninsula. So there could be some warmer temperatures Friday above 60 in this area because of that. Now, still the low there along the North Pacific Gulf interface, very weak sliver of a ridge from the Panhandle to the central Gulf Coast, more what we call a dirty ridge, not strong enough to really take care of the cloud cover and a few light lingering showers. But notice the clearing that's taking place here. Along the Arctic coast areas could see some sun, and again, high pressure extending from Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, northeastward along the Canadian Arctic coast. Thursday then, we're looking at southeast winds 10 to 15 knots across the inner channels of the Panhandle, waves generally a couple of feet at best. Offshore, a little bit more of a mixed bag of winds, northeast 10 knots off of Prince of Wales Island, whereas southeasterly near Port Alexander, winds then turn more northerly outside of Cross Sound, west of Sitka and west of Yakutat, with waves just a few feet. For Friday, overall, we're going to see generally southeast winds 10 to 15 knots along the inner channels, highest 15 knots, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, with waves 2 to 3 feet there, foot or two waves as you go up through Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. For the outer coast, winds are going to be south-southeast 15 to 20 knots, strongest again off of Sitka with waves maybe 4 or 5 feet, turning easterly once you get outside there of Yakutat Bay. And for the northwestern corner of the Gulf, Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound, variable winds all across the region at just 10 knots. So waves a foot or two, with the exception of maybe getting farther off of the Kenai Peninsula or well outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. For Friday, same thing out there around Prince William Sound, outside of Hinchinbrook entrance along the Kenai coast, variable winds at 10 knots, waves generally just a couple of feet. However, in Cook Inlet, winds are going to try to get a southerly component to them. Southeast there, Lower Cook Inlet turning southerly around Anchor Point, and then southwesterly up there north of Kenai toward Anchorage, and waves 2 to 3 feet. And look at here, Thursday, with just the weak pressure pattern. We have variable winds surrounding Kodiak Island and extending down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, waves generally a foot or two. For Friday, still variable winds on the North Pacific side and surrounding Kodiak Island at about 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. But winds are going to try to come southeasterly and pick up ahead of that front that'll be coming in from the west that's pushing through the eastern Aleutians. So winds could increase southeasterly 15 to 25 knots there, especially near and north of Cold Bay with waves 2 to 3 feet. Now on Thursday, the Aleutians already had one low come up over here, and so kind of a southerly component, winds of 25 knots from the south, Atka, Adak to just west of Adak. But as we get into Friday, there will be some stronger winds because of that secondary low that's going to be absorbed into the circulation of the first one. So as that secondary warm, occluding warm front comes across the eastern half of the Aleutians, ahead of it, southeast winds 25-30 knots on Alaska Nikolsky, and then those winds become southerly. Atka to Adak at 30 knots, and then once you get past that front, winds try to shift around to the west-northwest at 25 to 30 knots. Along the southwest coast, winds will be offshore 10 knots there in Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, and along the lower Yukon coast, northeast to east winds 10 knots, waves a foot or two, only 5-knot winds, maybe a 1-foot waves there within that wider expanse of Norton Sound. Further out, southeast to east winds 20 to 25 knots, Pribilovs, especially up there toward St. Matthew. And for Friday, south winds of 10 knots into Kuskokwim Bay, southeast winds 15 knots there, just on the outer portion there of Kuskokwim Bay, south winds of 10 knots into Bristol Bay, and then east-southeast winds along the lower Yukon coast 10 to 15 knots, and waves generally just a couple of feet. Winds, though, southeast to east, 25 knots from St. Paul and St. George up through St. Matthew. And as we get into the north, the west side of the Seward Peninsula for Thursday, Wales, Port Clarence, southeasterly winds, 10 knots. Same thing north side of St. Lawrence Island, waves foot or two. As we go up through the lower Chukchi Sea, winds are southerly, increasing 15 to 20 knots as you get past Kivalina to Point Hope and Cape Lisburne, and then they turn southwesterly along Point Leyte to Wainwright, though, at just 10 knots. And along the Beaufort Sea coast, winds will be east-southeast, 5 to 10, maybe as high as 15 knots around Utqiagvik. And for Friday, winds are going to become generally southerly across much of the region north of the Bering Strait. They'll have a south-southwest component, 10 to 15 knots along the Beaufort Sea coast, and as high as 20 knots from Wainwright down to the Lisburne Peninsula, and then back southerly, 5 to 10 knots across the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, before turning easterly 5 knots off of the Seward Peninsula at Wales and Port Clarence with waves only a foot or so. And the north side of St. Lawrence Island on Friday, you could see easterly winds to 15 knots with waves there of 2 to 3 feet.